Hello everyone! Welcome to the Turkish Foreign Policy course. Today we will continue with Chapter 6, Turkish Foreign Policy between 2007 and 2017, the Strategic Depth. Our first topic is the Strategic Depth Doctrine. Then we will talk about bilateral relations of Turkey under the Strategic Depth Doctrine and the paradigm shift debate. Then, implications of the Arab Spring for Turkish foreign policy, and lastly, bilateral relations of Turkey in the post-Arab Spring period. Let's start with the Strategic Depth Doctrine. Since 2002, there have been significant changes in Turkey's foreign policy formation through a new set of foreign policy principles. Turkish foreign policy has become more proactive in regional issues. The appointment of Ahmet Davutoğlu as the foreign minister in May 2009 confirmed Turkey's new stance in international relations. When he became foreign minister, he intended to implement his new foreign policy vision presented in his book titled Strategic Depth. In his book, Davutoğlu describes a new strategic vision for a potentially increased role for Turkey in the international system by reassessing Turkey's strategic position in the context of the systemic transformation of world politics after the end of the Cold War. Davutoğlu's vision of strategic depth claims to target placing Turkey right at the center of many geopolitical areas of influence by exploiting the country's historical and geopolitical importance. Davutoğlu sets Turkey's important foreign policy goals as part of his strategic depth doctrine. In order to meet these goals, there were three main methodological principles of the new Turkish foreign policy, being vision-oriented, systemic framework, and soft power. Along with these methodological principles, there were 5 operational principles set forth by Davutoğlu: balance between freedom and security, zero problem with neighbors, diplomatic discourse, multidimensional and multi-track policies, and rhythmic diplomacy. Now we can move on to the bilateral relations of Turkey under the Strategic Depth Doctrine and the paradigm shift debate. The policymakers of the ruling party focused on Turkey's relations with the European Union between 2002 and 2007. The EU membership became the center of discussion in Turkish foreign policy during these years. With the stalemate on the EU process, Turkish policymakers aimed to diversify Turkey's external relations, especially in its neighborhood. Turkey's new foreign policy principles, especially the zero problem with neighbors policy, as well as diplomatic discourse and multidimensional policies, led to a rapprochement with countries such as Syria and Iran. Following the financial crisis of 2008 and 2009, this diversification process speeded up and the Middle East region became an alternative to the European market for Turkey. Turkey, as a regional actor, diversified its relations especially with the Muslim and Arab world as well as with Russia. The ruling party's proactive foreign policy agenda received some criticism. For example, the neo-Ottomanism discourse has been a source of criticism. According to the critics of the active foreign policy agenda, the AKP policymakers aimed at reconnecting Turkey with former Ottoman territories, especially through the zero problem with neighbors policy. Also, some scholars argued that the AKP's foreign policy activism, especially in the Middle East region, was shifting Turkey away from the Western alliance and that Turkey was getting closer to the East. The paradigm shift discussion alludes to the overall change of Turkish foreign policy direction under the AKP governments. Let's talk about the implications of the Arab Spring for Turkish foreign policy. The Arab Spring started in Tunisia in December 2010 because of growing political and economic dissatisfaction of people with the country's leadership. The unrest spread to other countries in the region, including Egypt, Libya, Yemen, Bahrain, and Syria. The popular uprisings known as the Arab Spring in the Middle East and the North African region had a significant impact on Turkish foreign policy. Turkish policymakers believed that Turkey could promote democratic values without compromising its national interests or its commitment to regional development and peaceful conflict resolution. With this perspective, the Arab uprisings seemed to provide new opportunities for Turkey. Turkey reconciled its Eastern and Western values and followed a somewhat independent foreign policy. These developments had the potential to make Turkey a model and a source of inspiration for the states in the region that were undergoing political transformations. As regards to Syria, Turkey developed strong economic and political relations with the Assad regime under the leadership of the AKP. However, the popular uprising and the Assad regime's reaction against them brought Turkish-Syrian relations to a stalemate. Turkey adopted a wait-and-see policy during the early phase of the Syrian crisis. The situation in Syria not only posed economic problems for Turkey, but also exacerbated Turkey's security concerns. And our last topic for today is bilateral relations of Turkey in the post-Arab Spring period. Turkey's policies toward the Syrian regime shaped Turkey's relations with the US and other regional actors, including Russia and Iran. This part of the chapter evaluates the transformation of Turkish foreign policy in Syria following the Syrian civil war and the implications of these policies for Turkish-US and Turkish-Russian relations. The Syrian crisis became the most important challenge to Turkish foreign policy. It has affected and shaped Turkey's relations with other actors, including Iran, Russia, and the US. Turkey's Syria policy was interrupted by the Syrian civil war. As the crisis deteriorated in Syria, Turkish policymakers underlined that Turkey desired a democratic rule in Syria. After several unsuccessful attempts to convince the Assad regime to implement reforms, Turkey's relations with Syria shifted from cooperation back to conflict. Turkish-American relations have soured over the clash of interests during the Syrian civil war, particularly during the conflict in Ain al-Arab. On September 11, 2014, the US established a coalition with some Arab countries in the Middle East region to fight against the emerging jihadist group, the ISIS, in Iraq and Syria. Turkey's relation with Russia initially deteriorated in the mid-2010s due to the Syrian crisis. On November 24, 2015, Turkish authorities shut down a Russian jet over Turkish territory. This incident negatively influenced Turkish-Russian relations. The two countries cut their political, economic, and military ties. However, following the failed coup attempt on July 15th, relations between the two countries improved relatively quickly. So, this is the end of our program for Chapter 6 of the Turkish Foreign Policy course. Goodbye and see you in our next program, Chapter 7.